A lot of the same folks that were running the country, right? I mean, who, because that's one of the key questions a lot of people have is who's running the country during all this?
One key Democrat is essentially described that Joe Biden was a senior member of the board of five people running the country. So these people would be Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, at times Ron Klain, and then just sort of outside of them, Jill Biden's longtime chief of staff and sort of his deputy on the president's side, Annie Tomasini. These were the most powerful people in the country the last 4 years.
And these are people that have been longtime advisors to him. And what, to me, the cover-up that was most damning and most surprising was the way that they covered up information from getting to him.
Absolutely. They weren't just keeping Joe Biden from the world, they were keeping the world from Joe Biden. And that included his polling numbers, the way that the country was feeling, the tremendous anger that was continuing to bubble up. Joe Biden just did not seem to recognize a lot of that. And, a lot of this is in some ways sort of the dark side of loyalty, that they loved him so much, they were so loyal to him, that in some ways they were protecting him.
A clip from our show last night is making the rounds with my conservative friends on social media and on conservative news websites. Not even conservative. I would argue they're right wing, honey. And I want to play the clip for you.
To ask who's actually making the decisions. Who is actually running the country? Everybody wants to say Joe Biden wasn't running the country. I know for a fact he not only read his presidential daily brief, he was engaged in the meeting, he asked questions, and he gave directives. Donald Trump won't even bother to read the iPad.
Well, especially when this.
But we were discussing exclusive NBC News reporting that President Trump is at this point only getting the presidential daily briefing once a week. And Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, discussing changing the presidential daily briefing into a Fox News style presentation.
Boy, 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 boy. So we got to talk about some friendly fire that is occurring within the mainstream liberal media, okay? MSNBC is pissed at CNN over their coverage of Joe Biden's mental decline, okay? Even though CNN was complicit in the cover-up, you now have grifters like Snake Tapper coming out here and trying to make a quick buck off of a scandal that he helped cover up, okay? And MSNBC, they've decided that they're not going to pretend to be journalists, okay? And, acknowledge the truth about what happened to Joe Biden. No, instead, they're going to be mad and upset by the coverage of Joe Biden. The fact that you have some outlets now going back and trying to save their credibility when it comes to their coverage or their lack of coverage of Joe Biden's mental decline. And the reason why MSNBC is upset is because Democrats are upset, right? Democrats don't want to talk about this because they're doing this thing now where they're trying to do whataboutism, right? They're trying to say, well, you're talking about Biden, but what about Trump, right? This is what the ghetto Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett said in an interview when confronted about covering up Joe Biden's mental decline. Take a look.
Well, the Republicans on oversight have said they thought that Democrats lied and the White House lied to the American people about the former President Biden's, cognitive decline when people saw it for themselves on the screen, whatever. And so what do you say to those who say the Democrats hurt themselves in that whole deal?
I think we did hurt ourselves. I don't think it's for the reasons that you're laying out, but I do think we hurt ourselves because what Democrats tend to do is the Republicans know how to create an ecosystem of commentary, whether it's true or not, right? Because how long have we been talking about the whole Medicaid thing? Like, they will continue to readjust their message, but they are going to have a message and they are going to create an ecosystem of lies, right? And so there were Democrats that fell for it and we became divided. And that is how it led to this kind of unprecedented moment of Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris running. And so I think that people should have just stuck to their guns about what it is that they knew. Now, obviously, it's not like I've known Joe Biden my whole life, because I haven't. But I can tell you that I literally have had conversations with him, not once, not twice, probably not even 3 times, multiple times. And I never, ever felt like I saw anything that was decline. Now, would I be honest if I said that we don't all decline at some point? Like, there has to be a point just because we're aging. that there is like a level of kind of fall off that we all have. I think that that's the natural part of aging. It's the same thing that happens with our bodies, right? Like this is a whole body thing. Like you probably not running 10 miles anymore like you used to, right? So there is a natural, but does that mean that you're not qualified? Or does it mean that it is so detrimental that it's causing harm? Absolutely not. Because I can remember vividly, you know, when all these stories started to kind of start up, and there was this interview, and actually it wasn't an interview, it was a press conference. It was a press conference, and it had to deal with foreign affairs. And, you know, Joe Biden, anybody know anything about him, they know foreign affairs is like his wheelhouse. And he was so on point. Like, he understood, like, on a whole other level. And frankly, the rest of the world actually respected him. And it's not like, you know who the world is pissed off at? It wasn't Joe Biden. It's Donald Trump. When you have literally King Charles that's going off in Canada about Trump, when you have Canada, one of our close allies, that's going off about Trump, when you have Mexico, one of our close allies, that's going off about Trump.
Yeah. So it seems like the ghetto Democrat is the gift that keeps on giving, okay? Because she is running for leadership in the oversight committee, okay? And in that interview, she basically admits that if she was the leader of the oversight committee, that she would not have the awareness or the judgment to recognize that Joe Biden was in fact mentally declining. Well, Joe Biden was sharp, right? I mean, she sounds like Joe Scarborough, okay? I mean, she's clearly clueless when it comes to this fact that a vast majority of American people saw what was happening to Joe Biden, and for her to come out here and say, well, I didn't see anything, and he was amazing, right? He's a foreign policy genius, okay? Yeah. It's not a good look, okay? It's not a good look when you're running for leadership. So, you know, hey, I'm hoping that she gets her leadership position, right? Because if she is a leader within the Democrat Party, they are absolutely doomed, okay? They are absolutely doomed. So, with that being said, like I told you guys, MSNBC, they're upset, right? They're very upset with CNN, with Jake Tapper and his coverage. And you have Lawrence O'Donnell, a propagandist for the network, who is going on this monologue where he's going to get upset by the coverage of Joe Biden, but the lack of coverage when it comes to Trump and his alleged, according to MSNBC, mental decline, because President Trump put out a truth post. I mean, I think he reposted a post that is clearly a troll, right? It's clearly a troll. It's clearly designed to get people like him upset, right? And he falls for it, and he's using this, the liberal media is using this as evidence that, well, Trump is mentally declining. He's insane. Why isn't Jake Tapper talking about this, right? That's essentially what this segment is going to be about. So without further ado, let's laugh at it.
Well, the crisis facing this country and the world tonight is the complete collapse of mental acuity in the President of the United States, the current president. This weekend, the President of the United States endorsed a social media post that says there is no Joe Biden, executed in 2020, Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Needless to say, Donald Trump is the only president in history who can publicly embrace and accept and believe such insanity without immediately provoking a rush of questions by the White House press corps and news organizations around the world about the sanity of the American president.
Well, that's because, again, you are the only person that believes that that's a serious post, in the sense that President Trump really believes that. Obviously, he's trolling, right? Everybody knows that he's trolling, and you should be used to this by now. But again, they're so desperate to prove this narrative that, oh, well, Trump is actually the one that's mentally declining. He's the one that has mental issues. Why are we talking about that? And it's like your desperation is why nobody takes you seriously, right? That's the issue that these people don't really understand, okay? You cannot whataboutism your way through the criticism of Biden and the media's lack of journalism when it comes to his mental decline, right? Everybody knows who President Trump is. Everybody knows that was a troll. Nobody really believes that President Trump is mentally declining, okay? Nobody really believes that, at least not to the degree that Joe Biden was in office, right? I think that President Trump is actually still pretty sharp for somebody that is, up there in age, 1 hour, 2 hour speeches, sometimes without a teleprompter, right? I mean, pretty impressive. Okay. Joe Biden could not do that. So the fact that Lawrence O'Donnell can't recognize this, maybe he needs to have his mental capabilities checked, right? Because you have to be mentally declining in order to believe that that was a serious post, that President Trump actually believes that, and that was anything more than a troll.
Which means that the insanity of the current American president is now officially taken for granted in the news media. No huge banners on the cable news network that recently devoted itself to the issue of presidential mental acuity. That network did not dare devote itself to the mental acuity of Donald Trump. That network decided that the mental acuity of Joe Biden last year is a more important story now. No one at that network suggested that Joe Biden was ever incapable of doing the job of president. Their critique of Joe Biden is that he was incapable of delivering a sharp and polished television debate performance, which would have been true of every single president prior to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. What was lost in the relentless coverage of the Biden-Trump presidential debate was that after Joe Biden paused so long that he seemed frozen, that for the rest of that debate, no one appeared to pay attention to the rest of that debate. And the rest of that debate, Joe Biden actually made perfect sense. And Donald Trump did not. Donald Trump did not tell one true thing during that debate. But that doesn't seem to matter to the focus on Joe Biden in that debate. And I can understand that.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how is it that you can say that a man who allegedly tried to do debate prep for like 15 minutes and then took a nap by the pool, right? I'm not sure how you can say that he is capable of being president of the United States, right? When there were concerns about whether or not Joe Biden would be mentally aware enough to deal with an emergency situation at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? I mean, they actually did question his ability to do the job as president, right? And again, if you actually listen to the propagandists, you don't have to read the book. In fact, you should buy the book, right? You shouldn't read the book. Just listen to them tell all the details in the book. Again, there is clear criticism of this idea that Joe Biden could actually be president of the United States, right? He was not mentally fit enough to be president of the United States. Like, for example, they were essentially not telling Joe Biden certain things. They were hiding things from him. There were questions about his ability to make decisions and to communicate. I mean, the guy was talking about meeting with dead people, right? Yeah, there were actual serious questions about his ability to be president, okay? And for Lawrence O'Donnell to try to pretend as if this was not a big deal, right, that Joe Biden was still capable of being president of the United States, again, guys like him should be fired. But it really shows you just how low an outlet like MSNBC will go when it comes to their journalistic integrity, right? Not only do they refuse to do journalism, right, when it actually matters, when it's time to talk about why they didn't do journalism, why the cover-up happened, well, we don't need to talk about that. Let's not talk about what happened in the past, right? And then they get mad at CNN for covering it, right? To save their own credibility, right? They get mad at CNN for choosing to cover it. Again, there's reasons to be mad at CNN. But again, they're mad because CNN is actually covering it now and not talking about Trump, which again, just shows you how shameful this network actually is. This is not a journalistic outlet at all. This is not news. This is just straight up 24/7 propaganda. It's a glorified YouTube channel at this point.
Biden revealed in that debate that he was 4 years older than the last time he ran for president, and he was slower, much slower, and he was way more than 4 times smarter and more capable than Donald Trump ever was. That was also apparent in that debate. And we all know, as do the pushers of every anti-Biden campaign theory out there, that it would be impossible for Joe Biden on his worst day to tweet that Donald Trump was executed in 2020 and that Trump clones, doubles, and robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entities are what you see when you look at Donald Trump today.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Again, what makes this even more hilarious is the fact that when you understand how the media operates, right, you know that they've tried this before, right? The reason why nobody's having a serious conversation about President Trump's quote-unquote cognitive decline is because they spammed this card before and it just didn't work. In fact, CNN spammed this card before, and it didn't work.
There are people inside the government with concerns about the president's behavior and his stability. There's also spouses of White House aides concerned. Take a look at this from Kellyanne Conway's husband, George Conway. This is, of course, the husband of one of the president's top aides, saying on Twitter here that people should be seriously concerned about Trump's mental stability. I think we can put the tweet up on screen.
On that, what I would have liked to have seen, if there's any suspicion, as I'm sure there is, about his mental status, is to go a little bit further, which could have easily been done. That could have been done by doing an MRI. If you look at the report of the exam.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin this afternoon with breaking news. A stunning report out this afternoon revealing just how concerned at least one top administration official was about the chaos of the Trump presidency and the behavior of President Trump. The New York Times reporting the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein told FBI and Justice Department officials that he was considering secretly recording President Trump to try to document the dysfunction he was witnessing, and even discussed trying to garner support from cabinet officials to potentially invoke the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This would remove President Trump from office for being unfit to serve. This is according to several people who described these events to the New York Times. Obviously, his behavior is erratic and unusual. Do you think there's a case to be made that he's unfit?
And this is why it's so hilarious to me that Jake Tapper, while on his truth-telling tour, right, his tour to save his credibility, right, he still can't stop lying, right? Because apparently, according to him, he claims he doesn't know. If Trump was in office and he was experiencing the same type of mental decline that we saw to Joe Biden, Jake Tapper claims, well, I don't know if the media would have missed it or not, right? I don't know.
Jake, I would like to ask you, do you think that the media would have gotten this story sooner if it was Trump?
I don't, actually, because these issues of health are so sensitive to talk about and to report. And as you say, yes, we saw weird moments of Joe Biden. We also see weird moments, and they're different. They're not the same issue. They're not acuity issues, but we see weird moments of Donald Trump calling Nancy Pelosi, Nikki Haley, and the like. But it's impossible to say, as you noted, this is what's going on behind closed doors if nobody behind those closed doors is talking. So I really just don't think that. I mean, there are a million questions I'd love to ask about what's going on behind the scenes in the Trump White House that we can't get because they're not talking. I mean, I get that that's their job is not to leak to us anymore. And this is a much less leaky Trump White House than the first one. So I guess I just don't think so. That's not to say that I'm denying that there's a liberal bias in the media. I'm not denying that 100%. But on health and sensitivity issues, I don't think so. In 2019, Donald Trump went to Walter Reed, and we still don't know what he went to Walter Reed for. It still hasn't been reported. And they still haven't disclosed it. And so I think that in itself answers that question.
Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Right. That's why all these people make me sick. They make me sick. They pretend as if we don't have the footage. Right. I always have the receipts, guys. Right. I always have the receipts. Back in 2018, 2019, these people were demanding cognitive tests. They were floating every lie that came out of the White House from the Trump range people who basically got fired from the administration about how President Trump is insane. He's cognitively declining. He is having mental issues, right? They reported all of that, right? All of it. The only difference is that with President Trump, the media reporting didn't stick, right? Because clearly the American people could see when President Trump is in public and he's talking that he didn't have these issues, right? That the reports were not true. With Joe Biden, on the other hand, despite the media trying to cover it up, trying to deny it, people like Jake Tapper, for example, trying to deny it, and MSNBC trying to deny it as well too, that people could see that Joe Biden was mentally declining, right? That is the difference. The difference is that the people were not fooled by the coverage of the media. And that's why nobody is coming out here and talking about President Trump mentally declining or cognitively declining, because people can see that he's clearly not cognitively declining, okay? He's not to the degree that Joe Biden was. Yeah, you can say President Trump is old. He's getting up there in age. Yeah, but he's still pretty sharp. He's still pretty sharp for his age. So Lawrence O'Donnell and MSNBC, they can fume all they want, right? Simone Sanders, they can be mad all they want, but it's not going to change the fact that they lied and that they covered up what was happening to Joe Biden. And the crazy part about it is that now all of a sudden trying to come out and trying to say, well, what about Trump? It just makes these people look less credible. You can't what about Trump while at the same time covering up Biden. An honest actor would have sound the alarm on Joe Biden, okay, from the beginning. And if they got questions about Trump, if they had real questions about Trump, which again, I'm not sure how honest actor could have questions about Trump, but let's say that President Trump did start acting like Joe Biden, which I doubt, but if he did, an honest actor could then come out and call that out and have some credibility. But since they're not honest actors, since they don't have credibility, they don't have the ability to do that, right? You can't do that. You can't come out here and they'll say, what about Trump, and try to sound the alarm on that when you were silent about Joe Biden. Nobody's going to believe you. So unfortunately for MSNBC, this is not going to work, right? Jake Tapper, his little truth tour, that's not going to work either, right? His ratings are a disaster. His books aren't selling that much. And yeah, MSNBC is in decline just like CNN, okay? Both of these networks, they're dying, right? They're dying under the weight of their own propaganda. It is absolutely fascinating. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.